Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unlocked. I am your host, Tracy Wilson, and today I've got some super special guests with me. As you can see, I think it's probably on my right, but maybe it's on your guys' left. I've got two wonderful people sitting here today, not just one, but two of them. I've managed to catch two big fish in my net, and I've managed to convince them both to come on the show with us today. So I want to welcome to the show Kathryn and Michael Redman. So Kathryn and Michael, two super best friends. I'm gonna dig a little bit deep and sort of get them unlocked and for them to share with us a bit of their story. Also, they are the husband and wife dynamic duo that are part of a dynamic brand called Half a Bubble, or Harbo, as they like to call it. So they're a marketing and consulting firm. They've been around for quite some time, so they've got a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge and experience under their belt. So what they do is they actually help people build their business that is fueled with purpose, passion, and provision. And they help you to build really successful and profitable companies. So I'm going to sort of unlock a lot of their secrets. We're going to delve deep into both of those. And as you can see, I'm looking at their guys' setup and it's pretty schmick. So both of these guys are very well-seasoned podcasters and show hosts. So I know that we're in for an absolute treat having both of these guys on the show today. They're coming at us live. So as you guys know, I'm coming at you live from the Gold Coast, Australia. These guys are in Chico, California, where they absolutely love going to work every single day. And probably that's because they have adopted their own strategies of creating this really, profitable and purpose-driven business that is building a legacy. And like I said, we're going to unlock a lot of that today. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the show. Great to have you here, and great to also have all of our guests here who are joining us right now. They're all starting to dial in.
Thanks, Tracy. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's
We're
really
excited.
fun.
We would say good evening from Northern California.
I know. It's like I'm in your future, right? So if you come to Australia, I can tell you all about what's going on. And unfortunately, 2020 is throwing a few, through a number of punches in a number of different directions, and really, beaten up some businesses and people over the last few months. So I know that through the show, we're going to be able to, help people really navigate some of that and learn how to build this business that's got some passion. And I want to talk a lot about this provision that you talk about. And also, I saw on your website, I want to ask you some questions about, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Because I know that is a question that you ask a lot of people. So, guys, I just want to give everybody a bit of a really quick rundown, and I'll do this real fast. But we are live now in about 5 different places. For those of you who are inside of the Success Secrets for Business, Family and Life group, welcome. Love the fact that you guys join us every single week on the show. If you are not inside of that group, I would highly recommend that you go and find us on Facebook. It is Success Secrets for Business, Family and Life, and that you tune into all of the shows that we have on there. Not just my show, but there are a number of other experts that also run shows on that digital channel. So just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. And of course, you can also download the Unlock with Tracy Wilson podcast if you prefer to listen. So let's get stuck into this, because these guys, like I said, have got a wealth of knowledge, and I want to make the most of the time that I have with them so that we can go through as much as we can, particularly around, they've also got a book, and I'm going to share the link for that book a little bit later in the show so that you can make sure that you also connect with them and get a copy of their book. So let's tell us a little bit about you two. And I know you guys go way back, and I love those stories because my husband and I, we go way back too. So tell us how that all sort of happened and how you ended up in the business, and half a bubble out. Like, tell me about that. I'm intrigued.
So many stories to be had in that one list of questions.
Where are you going to start?
Right. Start at the very beginning.
The very beginning. We went to the same elementary school together.
We did, yeah.
So primary and around some places in the world, I guess it's called, 4th and 6th grade, we were in a play together. That's where we first ran into each other, The Hobbit. And and then we just kind of grew up in the same town together after that, getting to know each other in high school. But we started dating. We were friends in college, and then we fell in love somewhere after college, after all of that happened. And just It was kind of one of those weird things where you don't ever think it's going to happen. And then all of a sudden you stumble over falling in love. And that was 30 years ago.
Yeah. If you would have told me that I was going to marry Kevin Redman, I would have been like, no, you've read the wrong future. That is not going to happen. So and here we are. We've been married 27 years, and
we did several things before we started the company, and then we started Half a Bubble Out in 2004, which was about 18 years ago. No, 2002. And so we've been at this for 18 years, growing companies and dealing with challenges. Went through the Great Recession, came out of the Great Recession, survived the Great Recession, hit several other aspects. So coming into COVID and anything else that the economy seems to be throwing at all of us in the world, it's just one more thing of, you just, this is what you do as a business person. You, as an entrepreneur, you take the challenges, you try and find the solutions, you try and be wise and buckle down, and then you just make sure that you're not doing it alone. You find other people that you can build community around, because if you're doing it alone, you're setting yourself up for a lot more challenges. So we've talked about that a lot. It sounds like you talk about that a lot with just even your intro, talking about the communities and the different people. And it's just so critical. I was just on a call before this with a small group of folks that were together around the world, actually, and just trying to go, okay, how do we address this challenge that we all have, and how do we brainstorm through it? And I love it. It's fantastic.
So I'm going to chime in, because he did not answer the Half a Bubble Out question, and you cannot leave that one left.
I knew. Well, I think
it's got to be answered.
You have to answer it. I shouldn't answer it.
So the answer to the Half a Bubble Out question, where did that come from? What does that even mean? Is that the technical answer is, if you're thinking about a photo, like hanging a photo on the wall, or a frame on the wall, and you have the level, right? And it's just slightly tilted, then the bubble is half out. So that's the technical term. But the reason that we are called Half a Bubble Out is because a mentor of ours described my husband that way. And that was a long time ago. And he said, Kathryn, your husband's a genius, but he has a half a bubble out. So you might want to do X, Y, and Z, which involved him going back to school. And that's where that name came from. So half a bubble out means we're a little creative, think outside the box.
It was his way of saying I'm not quite level, so I need as much credibility as possible. And I was 28 at the time, so I needed even more credibility.
Yes. I love that. And, it's an analogy that I often use about, I use kind of the cooking and baking, because you can often find me when I'm not doing this sort of stuff. I'm in the kitchen cooking for, my very large family. So, you get one thing wrong in that recipe and it doesn't taste so good. So, really important that we do that. So tell me then about how did, I listened to your intro on your website, and you were talking about, when we're kids, we sort of dream about what do we want to do, or what do we want to be when we grow up, and often that is around a job. So let's kind of talk about that, and the situation that we're in right now, where a lot of companies are doing they do their research on how engaged are employees, and then they do this research and find that, actually employees are not really that engaged.
Not so much.
No. And then we look at sort of the business side of things and the number of businesses that actually fail. So let's kind of talk about some of the statistics there, and kind of what your findings have been.
When we hit the Great Recession, we were on a trajectory that was a very standard entrepreneur new business trajectory. 2002, you're starting out, you're trying to figure out who you were. We went from the spare bedroom to the reduced remodeled garage, and then we found an office space somewhere else as the company slowly grew. And then all of a sudden, we hit the Great Recession, and we had something happen to us that was actually unusual. And it was, we actually grew. Everything was falling apart, but we found a niche, and we call it a super niche. And it was the strangest thing in the world. We found podiatrists who were selling toenail fungus treatment with a special laser. And we somehow became these really rock stars at figuring out how to get these podiatrist patients, because people were tired of this problem. So in 2007, 2008, when everybody else was freaking out, even when our house was plummeting in value, because everybody's house, especially in America, was plummeting in value at first, we grew 400%. Our business in 18 months grew 400%. And one of the things that we realized is we weren't even ready for that kind of growth. We weren't ready for growing 10 or 15 or 20% a year is really nice because you can grow as a leader with it. You can
ease your way into it.
It can keep you on your toes, but you can grow with it. When it grows beyond you, all of a sudden it's like the plane going to an elevation that was never designed to go to. And we started shuddering all over the place. And we actually got to a place where we would drive to work and didn't want to get out of the car and go in because we actually hated it. It grew past our leadership. We had actually hired several people and made a couple of hires that were not the best hires for our company and our culture. We were still trying to figure out what our culture was. We weren't managing it very well. And then we had all this money coming in. So we kind of had this, man, this is great. This is what everybody hopes for, the growth, the cash, the bank account was filling up.
It's the dream. Everything is brilliant and we're miserable.
And then all of a sudden you're like, what?
We've created a monster.
I thought this is what I wanted. I thought this is what we wanted. And we had done all the stuff that everybody else says. You struggle, where are your clients, where's your niche, who are you going to be with? And we were growing and struggling and doing the new things. And now all of a sudden we had new struggles and going through, how do you start a company? How do you get that first elevation as you're growing? And then all of a sudden encountering this big boost, we had to reinvent a bunch of things. And we actually thought about, should we close the company down? We were that miserable. And you're like, okay, we're into this 6 years. Why would we ever close it down? And yet we didn't know what else to do. So we pulled back and we said, we've got to take everything we've learned from mentors before, relook at it. We need to find some new mentors to add to it. We need to find and study some new things. And we need to figure out, how are we going to grow? And we kind of came out of that with 3 core things that were real critical for us. And that's what we based the book on, is really those 3 core lessons that we learned and realized that there were things that were missing.
Well, and I would say too, that part of what drove even writing this book that we have based our business on is 2 things that you mentioned, which was the business failure rate, because we felt like we almost became one, but it wasn't for the typical reasons. And then as we dug in and studied and learned, it was like you combine the business failure rate with the employee disengagement rate, which when we were reading 2010 or so, it was Gallup had said it was 74% of American workers. And I think globally, it's not much different, are completely disengaged at work. And so here we were, we had created a company where for sure some people were miserable. We knew we were, and we were very close to falling into that statistic. So what could we do to kind of rework and reshape things so that we could come back to the place where we actually enjoyed our business, because we had provision, but we'd lost the passion.
And somewhere in the midst of this, I mean, we'll get to those 3 things in a minute if we have time, because I think they're real important and people probably want to know what they are. But this whole idea for us of we pursued our dream as an entrepreneur. Look, we want the freedom. We want to have time with our family. We have 1 child, our daughter, and now she's almost 25 years old. And she was just, 18 years ago, she was a little tyke. And we wanted to make sure we didn't screw that up royally, just running a business.
Because we only had 1 chance,
And so we were like, okay, what do you do? How do you create financial success? How do you create all the provision you need in life to meet all the bills of today and the dreams of tomorrow? And then when you do that, how do you make sure that you're doing something that's fulfilling and enjoyable? And we kind of settled on that word passion, but so many people don't like it. And I think it's fair. And I want to clarify what we mean and what we don't mean. We don't mean the flitting passion that somebody says, I've had 10 jobs in the last 12 months because I thought I loved it. And this was my passion.
Find my passion.
And they keep chasing it. That's not it. It's when you use your gifts, your talents, your skills, when you find something that you are as interesting and then it has purpose and meaning, and you kind of throw all that together. You said earlier, recipe. I love to cook. And when you put it in the right order and in the right ratios, you can have something that what it does is it kind of self-generates passion out of it. It's a pleasure and a fulfillment where you're like, okay, because this kind of passion is the type of thing that says, I'm willing to suffer. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit to get what I want down the road. Now I'm willing to give up some of those things or do some of the hard stuff. And when we call it that, there's very few people who wrestle with passion anymore, because what we're talking about is a deep fulfillment, not something that's a shallow, flittering thing like Tinkerbell.
Mm-hmm. And, that is, to me, that is something that now I teach. And I think we get to this point after you've done this a number of times, right? You kind of, the penny drops and you go, oh gosh, what I really should have done. I wake up one day, I don't enjoy working with these people anymore. I don't enjoy this monster, this beast that I've created. And you have the benefit of hindsight where you go, man, if I could do that, if I had the opportunity to do this again, maybe I would have created this a little differently. Maybe I would have had, taken some real time to think about, who do I really want to work with? Who do I want to wake up every morning and actually be around? What sort of culture do I want to create? What is my vision? What type of leadership do I want to create, et cetera, et cetera? And when you start doing that right from the get-go, all of a sudden, like you're talking about, you just, that momentum builds, and no longer are you at surface level with the passion that you're hoping that it's lust and it will, it won't wear off, but it's this true deep sense of love that stays around for, from elementary school right the way through to, the time we jump through other boxes. So, that is the, that is what we want to do. And I love the fact that you're talking about that, because it isn't something that is spoken about a lot.
Well, no, it's not. And I think, sorry,
no,
I think
go
that,
ahead.
as we went back to that place and we had the blessing of a little bit of time to do some reinventing, we really did say, okay, we don't have a business model, right? Mm-hmm. So that whole idea that like you start with vision, and then vision's in the middle, and then there's leadership, and you've got to deal with management and operations, and you've got to deal with marketing and sales and finance and culture. All these pieces have to work together if you're going to build a solid company. And we only had little bits and parts of that. So part of one of the three things we really needed was an actual business model that we could follow to make sure that we understood and were working on all of the key parts of being successful in a business.
Yes, well, it's having that holistic approach, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Approach. And when you start, you know these things. I mean, you kind of know these things. There's nothing. I don't think there's any magic. Wow, I never heard that before in this book at all. It really was for us taking a lot of the core things, making sure that they were in a system or a plan that you could actually use kind of as a checkbox for yourself. Am I taking care of this? Am I paying attention to that and not get off track? We found a long time ago that, that whole idea, and I don't like to write things down. I love to spend time keeping it in my head and throwing it around, everything like that, but I lose track of stuff. And I realized that when we worked with our clients, when they wrote it down, they started thinking about it more. So let's at least be high level and go, what is it that you're trying to do? What is it you're trying to accomplish? Are you working in these 6 areas successfully? And if not, you need to go back and make sure that you're ticking the boxes and doing some stuff so that at least you're bringing it up in a balanced way, as opposed to jacking up one side of the car and you're leaving the other one flat on the side. And so we started working on this and working with our clients and working with ourselves and realizing that is really, if I'm going to make the most out of every day, out of every hour, and I'm going to enjoy it, I want to get some meat. In airplanes, the propeller cuts through the air, and when you're sailing, you've got to cut through the water, and you want to get some traction there. And that's what this does, is when you have a clear and holistic plan, it just helps you do that. And it's amazing how many people know these things and don't do them.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting too, isn't it? Like a lot of people will go through, a lot of the mistakes that people make is that they don't have that solid plan. And then they start to overestimate what they can create in one day, and they underestimate what's actually possible in a year or 2 years or even in a month. But it's because they're sort of meandering along, hoping like heck that, they hit all the right points and that they're going to get to their outcome. And often what happens is they meander along and their goal is actually sitting over here to the right, and they end up way off track on the left and then wonder why. So having that, that really solid plan and a really, good understanding and idea of where you're heading with your, that holistic business model and the goals set very clearly with that vision that you talk about is super important.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. It sounds a teeny bit cliche, Tracy, but in some ways, we wrote the book that we wished we would have read before we started the company, right? It was like, if we could help you avoid the mistakes that we made, and we could help you think about not having to choose between your passion and finance, it's not passion or provision, that actually to be sustainable, both of them have to work together. So if we can think about it through that grid, if you're going to have ultimately profit, purpose, and legacy, then you need to be working in something that gives you joy, but you also need to be making money. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive hobby, right? So having both of those working together, so it's the passion, provision sort of grid, and then the holistic business model to say, let's make sure we're working on at least these 6 core areas. And it's not, we'll say it's not the only business model. It's just a business model, but you need a model. You need something that reminds you that there's more to it than the thing you're good at.
And what's interesting you guys will unlock and tell everybody what these 6 things are. But when I was looking at them, what was really interesting is that within those models, they are the very things that are the reasons that most businesses fail. And you alluded to like you mentioned earlier, this whole, thing around growth. And as much as we think, oh, wow, things are going really well, I've got a lot of profit coming in, but all the while, we're paddling like crazy and actually stressed out and not enjoying what we're doing, is because you don't have that operating system sitting around that enables you to bring in more of your clients, put them through a system and a process that you're able to manage and able to manage that growth, to give you almost a little bit of breathing space to enable you to grow your leadership with the business. So let's talk about, because now you've kind of let the cat out of the bag. I know I've picked up 3 things that Michael had mentioned earlier, and Kathryn, you've mentioned them now. But the 6 things that you cover that are inside of the book, because I think they are extremely important.
Well, the first thing is the vision. It's at the center of this wheel we've created. And when you're talking about the 3 things, vision's the first, the holistic model's the second. We'll talk about the third in a minute. The vision, when you start, if you don't have a clear, complete, and compelling vision, there was a study done years ago, and I believe it's been reproduced multiple times. Matter of fact, I remember first hearing about it from Brian Tracy. Do you remember who Brian Tracy was? Kind of one of the grandfathers in sales and marketing of the last 50 years. And the study that he was talking about was those people who put together a business plan and put it in the drawer and never look at it again are more successful statistically when you look at the company in 5 years than people who never did a business plan and wrote it down. And this idea of having a vision allows you to go through that exercise, if nothing else, to go, where am I going? What's the purpose of what I'm doing as I'm going there? We call it a core purpose. We take it from good to great. We didn't invent it. It was already amazingly articulated of companies that did multiple times the market. And so when you have a core purpose of this is what we do for a living, Disneyland makes people happy with wholesome entertainment. It's that simple. Are there other companies that do that? Yes, because that's not your distinctive, but you know what you do and you stick with it. The next is your core values. And then the next chunk is, where's that North Star? Where are you headed? And we believe that it should be a big, hairy, audacious goal, something so big that it actually is worth going after. It may take you 10 to 30 years to accomplish, but it's worth throwing your life into. And it gives everybody something to go, hey, we're working towards something. So it allows you to focus yourself. It allows you to focus your team. And you're going to need a team, because if you're going to go after anything significant and worthwhile, you can't do it alone. You need people along with you. Yeah, so it starts with that vision. It goes to leadership. We'll talk about leadership in a minute, because it turns out leadership's the really big core third thing. And then we go into management and operations. You've got to know the operation side, and you've got to be able to work with people. Leadership is really high level. It's about knowing what that vision is. Vision is the first step of leadership, and it's about who you are as a person and growing. But management is that day-to-day, how do we implement the plan? How do we make sure we're staying on top of it? So many leaders don't want to do that. They're like, look, you're wasting my time. And I tell them, no, your employees aren't wasting your time. If they're blowing it, maybe you hired wrong or you didn't train right, but you've got to manage and inspire them. You've got to be the leader of a team. And then you go into marketing and sales and having a clear plan on that, because so many companies, they have entrepreneurial seizures. They start these companies. They don't know how to get customers, and they don't know how to have a repeatable process.
Or they're really good at getting customers, but really bad at keeping them.
Oh my goodness.
So they have a leaky bucket. So we want to shore up all of those areas. So marketing and sales.
We go into finance.
Oh my gosh, Tracy, how many people have you worked with who are scared of their finances? They don't know how to read their reports. Yep. They don't look at it until it's tax time. And the only thing they're measuring is whether or not they feel like they have money in the bank. And then they forget about that thing that they already paid. So finance is a big one.
Some of the CFOs we interviewed for the book, one of them said, I have so many clients that they work with different organizations that say, I have money, the books say we're profitable. Where's the cash? They don't even understand cash flow. And these are people with multi-million-dollar companies who still don't understand where their money is. And because the books say I'm rich, why doesn't my bank account?
Yep. And then the last one is culture. So really being intentional, right? Just with the recognition that culture is going to happen. Stuff grows with or without your intention. So if you're going to be intentional, if you're going to be a good gardener, then you're going to be careful about the culture that you're growing, and you're going to make sure that you're hiring and training and making sure that people are aligned. They understand your values. They walk with that vision and purpose that you have. And so all of those things begin to tie together. But those are the 6 pieces. So vision in the center, then leadership, management and operations, marketing and sales, finance, culture. Is that 6? Did I do it?
I
did. Well done, you.
You did well. So, and I want to talk about this piece, leadership, because it is, that is often, and certainly I've seen, so my background, just so you guys know too, I've come out of banking and finance. So I was a regional manager of a bank.
Okay.
So this, the whole piece around the finances, I'm hearing you. And that was actually one of the key reasons that I went off and decided I would start my own business and teach, have taught a lot of how to read your balance sheet, what are the things you should be looking for, how do you implement KPIs, all of those sorts of things, because as my clients, when I was in banking, would come in, my role was actually to either approve or decline loans. And unfortunately, I'd have to say that I'd decline more than I approved. And a lot of that came down to, the things that you're talking about. And often a bank is not just looking at, can you actually afford to pay that loan back? They're looking at much more than that. And all the things that Michael and Kathryn are talking about, guys, they're actually all of these things. So, it makes it worthwhile for you to have a handle on all of these 6 key areas. But leadership. So you're saying, leadership being the big thing, and often we talk about, hiring new people and putting people on, but often those people are looking to someone. So we talk about the North Star being sort of the place where we're headed, the vision that we're creating. But I think there's 2 places that they actually look. One is, what is the vision? And they're buying into that. The second is they're looking at me or you or whoever the person is at the helm for their direction, and that sets the tone of the culture of the company. So if you're let's call it, you're slightly off center, you're half a bubble out.
Off level.
Yeah, then as far as your leadership is concerned, then that's probably going to ripple effect down your team, and it won't be just one half bubble out. By the time you get to the person further down the chain, you're a whole 6 degrees off, and all of a sudden your picture's sitting on the wall, looking very crooked and extremely annoying.
That's why we hire people who aren't like us, Tracy.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
you're right. With leadership's critical. I heard it said once that the CEO is the chief culture officer. You really are. You're setting the tone. It's any good leadership. Any good leadership book talks about the fact that everybody's looking to the leader. In our case, we've got 2 of us at the helm, and they're watching us. And that premise that you have to rise up to a place where you've got to be walking the talk. If you say you're going to go here, you've got to go there. If you say this is important core values, you've got to hold them. The old days of mission statements and stuff, a lot of people in the last 10, 15 years are throwing mission statements out. They don't believe they work anymore. But it turns out that there's this really interesting story that came out of the Great Depression in the Chicago area of the United States. And everything was falling apart. Companies were caving in. It was as bad as everybody said. And there was a gentleman who said, "What are we going to do differently?" And he said, I think we should come up with some basic tenets on actual being caring human beings. So he brought his VPs together and he said, okay, we're going to do, and I'm not going to remember all 4 of them exactly, but we're going to build relationships and friendships. We're actually going to tell the truth. We're actually going to look for win-wins between us and our customers and other business people and our vendors and everything else. Well, this was one of the reasons the Great Depression happened, was because there were no legislation, or almost no legislation. There were no rules of fair conduct. There was just we're going to grab as much money as we can and to heck with anybody else. These VPs looked at this gentleman and thought he was crazy, but he said, "Would you just give me 6 months?" And they started to see their balance sheet turn around. They started to see their income statement grow. And when they did that, they started realizing that there was something to these core values, if you will, and they kept them very secret. They actually became a trade secret. And in the 1950s, he willed them away to another organization. And that story came out. And what I got out of that story, when I first heard it told about 12 years ago, I was sitting in this audience in one of these lunchtime business meeting things, and you're sitting here listening to a speaker and you're wondering when you're going to get out of here and when are they going to be done. And all of a sudden the light bulbs went on. I realized that this gentleman had figured out an idea of saying, we're not going to say we want the company to be like this, put it on the wall and tell everybody to do that, and we'll go do what we want. They dug deep and they said, this is what we value. This is what we think is actually important in how people should behave towards one another, how business should run. And so I think a lot of times mission statements miss the mark because they're not coming out of those core values. And when you choose core values in your company, or your leadership team gets together and does that, and they're out of your core values, the way you believe business should work, it becomes a lot easier to be that leader who sets the culture tone, because you're not trying to become something. You're not trying to like, wow, I don't want to live up to that because I don't want to live my life like that. It's just like, be true to yourself. And there's a huge part of that. But as you know, in leadership, and as we've seen, and as we said earlier, our company grew above our leadership. You've got to keep growing as a leader. Yeah. And that's really the critical crux for us on that third part of leadership, is if you're not growing your inner game and your outer game, you're in a lot of trouble. But conversely, if you do and work on it, you can build a great company that goes a lot of places.
Yeah. And I'm just going to expand a teeny little bit, because we do talk about inner and outer game. So a lot of times when people are doing, especially business, they're talking about mostly the outer game, which is how people see my leadership. But like anyone really, if you think about it, most people are smart enough to know that the outer game is kind of the tip of the iceberg. And everything else that really makes up the leader, that's the stuff that's under the water that nobody sees. That's your inner game. So if you're not working on personal development and on really understanding who am I, how do I tick? Why do I react the way that I do? Why did I freak out on that person? Like, what is happening with me? And if you're not paying attention to that stuff, then you're not going to grow as a leader. So we talk in the book about this concept of the inner game and the outer game, and how do you grow to be a creative leader, not a reactive leader, so that you're helping people and helping them grow, and you're good at both relationships and tasks, not just one or the other. So the leadership piece is really, really big, because one of our favorite sayings is a company cannot grow beyond the length of the leader's shadow. So however long the leader's shadow is, that's as far as the company can grow. And if it grows beyond that, it'll begin to retract back to that shadow.
And half a bubble out, when we grew 400%,
it was beyond our shadow.
It was beyond our shadow, and we grew
just the smidge,
and we shrunk back to a 200% growth. Now, being good marketers, we often will start with saying, in about 24 months, we grew 200%. And that's very impressive to most people.
And it's very true.
But
it's just
the arc at which we grew was very painful.
And you're right. A lot of marketers would say that, and people would be attracted to that. But it is sort of delving a bit deeper and starting to understand, well, what's underneath that, and how do you create, the holistic business where you are happy in all areas. I mean, the other thing that I think is extremely important, and part of, the show, is about business, family, and life. And often people will, almost compartmentalize. Well, I've got a great business. I'm just going to do this here. And you spoke about it a little bit earlier when you were talking about your daughter and, making sure that she's okay in this entire process too. But the reality is, it's all of you. You're bringing that authentic you, telling the truth, but being truthful in everything, in all of your capacity. So whether it's, with your family, your business, and your entire life, in my opinion, they all fit together. And if you can make them all work, in harmony, then you've got something pretty special.
Yeah, no, we could not agree with you more. I think one of the saddest stories that we've heard, and it's been more than one time, is the story of the entrepreneur who's like, I'm going to build this business, and we just have to work really, really hard for 5 years. And then we're going to have a pile of money, and then we'll focus on our relationship. And by the time the 5 years is up, they may have a pile of money, but they have no relationship. And that's just a tragedy. They've missed the kids' soccer games. They've missed, whatever. And so that whole idea of, you said it, we bring all of who we are to work. So one of my favorite terms that totally dates me and makes me sound really old, but do you know the term WYSIWYG?
Yes.
You ever heard that term? What you see is what you get, right? The old computer term. So we love that concept of I want, no matter where we are in the community, I want to be WYSIWYG. I don't want someone to run into me outside of the office and be like, oh, right? Yeah. I don't want a client to see me in a different environment and be confused by my actions or my behavior. I want all of who we are to be able to be, obviously you can have different conversations, but I don't want who I am to be confusing to people. I want us to be authentic. So
absolutely. And it's how much easier is it to, run your life and your business when you're just being you, being
so
authentic, having to put on these facades or, what am I, who am I today? And put on,
it's a lot to keep straight.
It's a lot to try and keep, to keep a handle on. So let's talk about some tips, because one of the things, you've so extremely important is this concept of working on your inner and your outer game. So, a lot of people know kind of the whole outer game piece. It's, the tactic strategies, all of those sorts of things. But let's talk more about that inner game. What advice would you give to people who are, I suppose, just almost on beginnings of their entrepreneurial journey, and they haven't, because it takes some time to kind of get to this point of, actually, I need to work on some stuff internally, so that I can actually cast a much wider and longer shadow. What are some of the things that they can do?
It's a great question.
And she's looking at me.
Well, off you go. It's your favorite topic.
I love this subject. Okay.
I would never deign to.
So the first, if we're taking this person who's just starting, okay, the first thing you do is you just got to start learning. There are a few great books out there. But what you're learning about is you're learning about, like, I love the topic of emotional intelligence to help coaches move forward. It is part of the outer game, the way you interact with people, but you have to be self-aware of your own emotions and able to control them. I was mentoring a guy years ago, and he was telling me about his journey, and he'd been with a counselor, and she gave him an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with probably 70 different emotions on it. And she said, "Which one do you feel right now?" And he said, I sat there and I stared at this piece of paper and I couldn't tell her which emotion I felt. He was a normal guy that was doing normal things. And yet all of a sudden he was so detached, he couldn't identify emotions that got him there, and realized that was one of his journeys of trying to figure it out. So that whole idea of studying and learning, and emotional intelligence is a great place to start, is one of the great places to start, because you need to know that's where your sabotage happens a lot, is where your own thought patterns and your own emotions get involved. Wounding, defensiveness, people have broken trust with you, you don't trust back, those kind of things. And we always recommend The Speed of Trust as a book by Stephen M.R. Covey. It's a book that details and talks about this mystery, I think, that most people think is trust, the myths of trust. And he talks about it in business. Are you familiar with the book, Tracy?
I'm familiar with Stephen Covey, but not that particular.
So this is his
son.
So Stephen M.R. Covey, and it's The Speed of Trust, and it's the best breakdown of trust that we've ever read, and we recommend every client that comes through, everyone has to read it. It's like, this
is your first book.
We'll make sure we get that into the comments so that everybody can.
Fantastic.
It's almost as good as Fulfilled. Almost. No kids, probably.
We'll put that one there too.
Might be better. And what we're talking about is, if you're starting on that journey, it's a great place. So you want to start with learning. The next thing I think that's absolutely critical is having a community of people around you that are like-minded. Finding those people that say, I want to grow. I believe that growth is, as a leader, is important, and I'm pursuing that in my life. So then you can have conversations about, how did you overcome this? What book did you read? What was that important? Well, I just really blew it with an employee recently. What do I do? And I think that that's phenomenal, because you start taking that and it starts becoming a discussion. And there's an old proverb that says, we become who we hang out with. Mm-hmm. And if we hang out with people who are those genuine, authentic people who are pursuing their dreams and goals in business and everything else, there's a good chance that we're going to become like them, because we're rubbing off on them and they're rubbing off on us. But then we take it to the next level and we go, okay, you need a coach. And Kathryn and I both do leadership coaching as well as consulting. And coaching, we kind of take a path that we were taught by a mentor of ours, that coaching is, a lot of times people say you just ask questions and pull things out. But we really do combine a combination of mentoring and coaching, a mentoring and question asking, because sometimes I can ask you questions all day long, but you may honestly come, I don't know.
You might be stuck,
or your answer may be wrong. And I know some people aren't going to like that, but like, the fact is if you don't know how to define what a balance sheet is and what it does and how to read it, it's not open to interpretation. It is what it is. So there's that place where a coach is going to help you read. We say you can't read the label from the inside of the bottle, and you need somebody that gives you that outside perspective. And when you really combine a philosophy of learning for that self-development, a community of people that you can be authentic with that are pursuing growth also, and a coach in the midst of that, then you have something that's pretty strong. But there's a fourth piece in that growth that is probably as critical as all those other three, and it's allowing people to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Because it's nice to hang out with people. It's nice to have a coach. It's nice to read a book. But if you're not willing to say, if you're not allowing to let people call you on the carpet, I got pinned at my coach last week, who's a dear friend at this point in life. He spent 35 minutes nailing me to the wall. And I didn't really appreciate it.
It's not real comfortable, is it?
No. And I write him a check for this. And yet, Although in this age, I don't write him a check per se, but anyway, now I'm thinking about that. And yet he's like, if you keep growing, even those of us that know these things, he says, if you keep going in this direction, you're headed towards burnout. There's just been some natural deductions from your bank account, from your gas tank this year, lots of big projects at work, launching a book, managing through COVID, living in the midst of COVID globally. And he says, you've got to do it. And the next time we talk, you've got to be able to say, I'm making some changes. And these are the things I'm going to do for my own self-development and growth. And I'm like, and the thing I hated the most about it, Tracy, wasn't that he was right. It was that I know this. And I teach it. I coach people on it. I get to be the one that holds them accountable and sticks the finger out. But I needed it. No matter what level we are as leaders, we need that accountability, that community.
Yeah.
We need somebody that we're willing to trust to speak in as a coach, as a mentor, and we need to be actively learning. And I think that's how you really say to that person who is just starting out, here's a path you could follow with those 4 pieces. But then I really do think that for those of us that are more senior in years and more senior in development and are leading, those are good just reminders.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the moment I got myself around the right people and at that time, I remember a few years back, it was a big investment for me. In fact, I joined a group that was in the USA and I'm here in Australia. So not only was my commitment to joining that group, but it was also committing to flying back and forth constantly to up my game, to cast a bigger shadow, to get myself around, people who were at a higher level than me. Because what does that do? Well, when you all work together, you get to rise all ships together, so it's super, these things that you speak of, as much as you alluded at the beginning, it's not rocket science, but the fact is that most people don't do it. Like, it's sometimes the most simplest things that we go, okay, we know we should be doing that, but we don't do it. And often that's where a coach can come in and, like you say, kick your backside when it's required at times. And but on the flip side of that, as the person who is, we've got to be coachable. So being somebody who is prepared to get that sometimes harsh and hard feedback, take it on board, not take it to, not get all emotional about it, which is where that book I think will come in extremely handy, is being able to, temper our emotions, understand where they're coming from, understand that the information and the feedback we're getting is coming from a good place and is for the betterment of us and our business. And when we can look at it from that, from that point of view, then you've got, you really do put yourself in the best possible place for allowing yourself to have that continued growth.
Yeah, that's good. It's really good. I think the other things that we've done a lot of, and, you don't want to overload people, but there are some basic, even just personality tests that I think also provide some great values. So we're big Myers Briggs fans, but like understanding how you're put together as a leader, as a person, kind of what your makeup is. And then learning some of those things, the discs, strength finders. I mean, there's just some great stuff. Even, what's the Enneagram, right?
Yeah.
And, there's just some.
Everybody in the world's hot on the Enneagram right now.
Right.
Well, on our website, we also have, and in a book that we've got coming out very shortly, it is about how to find your inner genius. So, of these sorts of things is like understanding, how do I tick? What makes, what lights me up? And when you can understand that, well, then you're on, you've got a much better chance of actually creating something that you are going to enjoy long term, that has some profitability, but also sustainability with it.
Yep.
Well, okay, let's talk about the inner genius for a moment.
Yeah.
If you don't understand what your inner genius is, if you don't understand what makes you tick and those places where you thrive, and there are going to be the most rewarding and you're going to have the biggest contribution. If you can't do that, you will never be able to hire employees and find that magic in them. And it's like, that's a natural thing. If I learn about myself, then all of a sudden I can start looking at my team and how do I hire for my team and how do I find the right person for that? Well, if I can find the right person that has inner genius in that area, and I can
Absolutely.
bring them on, and they fit our culture. And so they're competent at the skills that are needed for that. That fits the Nerd Genius. Their character fits our culture. All of a sudden you've got this amazing thing. But if you haven't done the work to try and figure it out, you're never going to find out how to put the team together that actually is going to create, like Synergy says, is going to create more than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like trying to put, I mean, I'm going to attempt to use an American terminology here because I know very little about.
We believe in you.
We call it gridiron, but American football, right? So it would be like trying to put a team together with a whole lot of, what do you call them? Linebackers. Everybody is that. I mean, you're just not going to win a game, are you? So,
you're going to knock a lot of people over, but you're not.
So look, see, and I use that terminology. I don't even really know what a linebacker does. That's just me, I've been to actually 2 games in America when we came for a holiday. So I have experienced that American, experience of going to a big football game. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, and Kathryn's the sports person in our family.
I'm a big National Football League fan.
I had to learn to watch football every week when we got married. That was part of my confession as getting married. I will watch football.
Netball or rugby league. Well, I could probably talk about all of those all day, but when it comes to American sport, ice hockey and gridiron, I'm not that familiar on it. But anyhow, that is the case, right? So you need to understand, like, who am I? What is my inner genius? How do I identify that in somebody else and align that with, do they actually buy into my vision? Have they got the right skill set? And do they fit our culture? Well, now we're talking. Now we've got somebody who is probably going to, hang around and be a really nice complement to our team.
Yeah.
And those people are amazing. I mean, the people on our team, that we have now, it's astronomical. And the years they've been with us. So the amount that they bring, they're not getting stale on the shelf. They're not becoming these people that are just like corporate,
minions.
They're people we can trust. They're people that when we're off doing speaking engagements or we're off working with clients in other cities, they're people not only that we know that, the place is going to run great, but it may run better without us because they're just that tuned into everything. Yeah. And when they come to a decision, I love it when one of our senior leaders, she comes to me periodically and she'll go, okay, I had this conversation. This is what I said. Before I answered them, I thought, what would you say? and I'm like, I think this is what you would have said. And it's like, yes, it's exactly what I would say. That's exactly what I would do. That's how I would deal with it. And if there's any coaching, it's like, and maybe I would have hung up on him faster, but I own the company and you don't. So it's amazing when you have the right team.
Absolutely makes all the difference. So before we wrap up today, because I feel like you and us, we could just have a conversation that goes on for hours and hours. But we have a show that has to end, and unfortunately, and we've got another lot of people that have got to jump on and do their shows. So, but before we do wrap up, there's a few things that I do want to ask you about, because I do not want to leave today without all of our viewers understanding what tell us about Harbo Village.
So our main company is Half a Bubble Out.
Hey.
Okay. Yep. The main company is Half a Bubble Out, and Harbo Village. Harbo is an acronym for Half a Bubble Out. Yeah. It's the training arm of the company. So we've written the book. We have a course on the whole passion and provision strategy and those kind of 6 core pieces. So the Harbo Village is the place that we do our training world.
It's where you can join in. You can get any of our smaller trainings, our larger full course on passion and provision, and our community goes through there. And it all came really short. It came from a vision that someday we want to actually build a full village where we can have people actually running around, running businesses, so that the communication, it's that team and that community, actually they're getting coached and everything in live time with their employees, and they're all in the same village. Who knows if it will ever happen?
I love that concept, and that is so with my culture. So I'm originally from New Zealand, and our culture talks a lot about creating a village, right? Mm-hmm. So even when you're bringing up children, we talk about the fact that it requires a village to bring up a child, a whole community to do that, to bring up a, well-rounded, well-grounded, child. Same concept, right? When we're birthing these things, it's like your business becomes your baby. So
it takes a village to raise a business.
It does. It takes a village to raise a business, and all of the chiefs and every other cook in the kitchen that is required to make every component of that that operation work well. The other thing is, you guys, with the book. So I want to make sure that everybody is noticing this. You probably are. Running across the bottom of our screen right now is where you can get a copy of the book Fulfilled. So go to www.fulfilledthebook.com. You can pick it up today for $10, and have a really good read of it, because, like Kathryn said, it's better than that other book she mentioned. So, have a read of that, and then go and get the other Stephen Covey book. So
it's also on Amazon in Australia if you are an Amazon person.
Beautiful. So, all right. Well, there you go, guys. If you're in Australia or New Zealand even, you'll be able to pick it up from there. But I want to thank you guys so much for being on the show with me today. It has been a heap of fun. It's nice when you get people that are on, same wavelength and singing from the song hymn sheet, so to speak. So loved the fact that you guys were here. Love your concepts and what you're talking about. And I hope that you will be back on the show again, sometime soon. We're guys, and if you want to be on the Unlock show with me, you need to head on over to the metadimedigitalco.com website page, and you can make an application. And we're pretty full up for the rest of this year, but get on that waiting list so that I can get you on the show, because I'm sure that there are loads of people in our community that have got great things to share, and that's what this is all about, is helping people with a platform to share your message and your knowledge, because there are people out there in this world right now that need to hear it. So thank you so much again for being here. Look forward to having you guys back again at some point. Don't forget, everybody, go and buy the book, Fulfilled thebook.com. And as you guys know, I'll also be back this Friday. So this Friday, I will be doing the third part of the series that I've been doing, which is the authentic brand effect. And what I've been doing with that particular series is actually teaching you guys how to go from an unknown expert, or teaching you the tools, the things that an unknown expert or entrepreneurs are doing that are helping them to find connection that helps them build profitable authority. So this week is the third one in that series, and it's going to be all about creating revenue generating content. I'm going to share with you the types of content that you need to create that actually helps you to attract and prime your prospects and your buyers. So if that's something that you want to do, then I would recommend that you join me on the show on Friday, 10 a.m. Australian or Brisbane time, and we'll make sure that we get through all of that content for you guys and share some really great value with you. But for today, that is it. Thank you so much for watching the Unlock Show. I'm Tracy Wilson, and as you guys know, there is just no other way but to live your life unlocked. So see you again on Friday. Bye.